Welcome to Helping Organisations Thrive, and welcome to a new series I've been doing on entitled HR Challenges Faced by SMEs. Well, we're talking to HR professionals that will provide you with insights and pragmatic solutions to help you. And today I have the pleasure of Victoria Thomson on the show. Welcome, Victoria.
Good morning, Julian. Nice to see you.
Good to see you. And you are the owner of Ambridge HR, a full-service HR consultancy.
Yes.
And I like your strapline is shining a light through the fog of HR. And so you are there to help bring clarity and help to SMEs. And you've had over 20 years working in HR and obviously owning your business. So lots of experience, lots of expertise. And today we will be exploring menopause in the workplace, thinking about policies, how to think about it on a day-to-day basis, what does it mean, and why we should take this seriously in our organizations. But before we get there, first I want to ask is, what do you love about what you do, Victoria?
Well, what I really love actually is being able to help businesses very much in, as you say, that fog of HR. It really is a bit of a legal minefield out there. And it can be very easy for businesses, albeit unwittingly, to land themselves in hot water if they don't properly understand what the implications of HR can have on their business. So being able to provide that shining light for them and to very much kind of handhold them through any processes, to be able to give them options. Quite often businesses come to me because they feel that they don't have any options, that often employment legislation is there to work against them. And it's not actually. If you understand it properly and you know how to apply it, then there are always options open to businesses. So for me, I love that opportunity to help problem solve for them and to find out what the problem is, what the end result is that they're looking for, and then give them those various ideas about how we get there, really.
Yeah, I think people got to view HR a little bit more like that you can solve problems. You're not there just to sort of tell them they've done anything wrong, but actually
No.
you obviously use law and you bring that in as well, but in terms of understanding and help them to navigate those challenges, perhaps they've made some mistakes or perhaps they weren't aware of things, but I think that's really, really helpful. So today we're going to be talking about menopause, and again, that's a relatively new area that's been brought into the light of workplace. Obviously, it's not a new area in the sense of women have always had menopause, and but it's bringing it into the workplace. And I just want to just set some context of that before we talk about it. I was reading, according to Professor Jo Brewis, co-author of the government report on menopause a couple of years ago, she said menopausal women are the fastest growing workforce dynamic. So
Absolutely.
we really need to take note of that. The average age for a woman to go through menopause is 51. However, a lot of the symptoms can happen way before that, in the sort of perimenopausal sort of phase.
Yeah.
And they reckon 3 out of 4 women experience symptoms, 1 in 4 serious symptoms. And they reckon also 1 in 3 of the workforce will soon be over 50, and retirement ages are also now at 68. So it's a big thing to think about and a big concern. And I guess the first thing is, I guess from your perspective, a quick definition on menopause, and also what are the symptoms that we need to be aware of that women may have?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's a really big subject, and as you say, it's beginning to get a bit more traction, and people are beginning to talk about it a bit more. But to be honest, I think education is a huge part of this, and as much for women as for anybody else, it's a subject that very much has just not been talked about at all. It's really been seen as a taboo. You go right back to kind of school age, I suppose. And, in biology, we were all taught about the reproductive cycles of various animals, humans included. But there is nothing about the end of a reproductive cycle for women that is taught at any stage of education, possibly unless you are a doctor. And even then, it can be quite difficult to get perimenopause or menopause defined by a doctor. And I've spoken to a lot of women who have absolutely had that experience and have had real trouble in getting HRT prescribed because their GPs don't fully understand it or don't take into account the range of symptoms that can be there. And the range of symptoms are huge. There are about 40, so I'm not going to go through every single one of them.
I didn't realize there were so many.
Yeah, there are a huge amount, but suffice to say that they affect women head to toe, mentally and physically, all aspects of their lives that it affects. And a lot of people think that the menopause is, feeling a bit teary or a bit moody, suffering from hot flushes. But it's not always physical symptoms, and it's not always easy for people to see or to understand what somebody might be going through. And as you mentioned, perimenopause can start up to 10 years before a woman goes through the actual menopause. And that's a very long time to be suffering symptoms which are changing, which are developing, which are getting worse. And so, I mean, for doctors, it's quite difficult to try and define it, because then it might be something else. And so obviously any other health concerns need to be ruled out first. But then if it is actually the menopause, then it's sensible for people to actually properly understand what all the symptoms are. They can track their symptoms. There are various apps that are out there. Balance is a really good one. And there are sort of educational documents on there as well, so people can actually educate themselves, find out what other women are experiencing, and how to deal with it, and how to talk to people as well, so that you actually get support, which is the really important thing. And obviously that's where businesses and employers can come into the equation as well to help with that support.
Yeah, and it's interesting. We talk about education and awareness, and we've had mental health over a number of years has become more of a awareness and more of an insight in how to look after people and care for people in the workplace from a mental health perspective.
Yeah,
I think I was shocked when I watched that program by Davina McCall. I think it was sometime last year.
Yes,
on the menopause, and that was obviously a great awareness, great education, but of the lack of awareness even within the medical profession.
Yeah,
and that's what shocked me more. And it's taking something that's so not known. I know it's difficult sometimes to perhaps diagnose it, but then something into context of a workplace of a layman. How do you then do that? That's quite a challenge, isn't it? Even if the doctors are not entirely sure neither.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's why, I mean, it would be great if there is a Women's Inequality Committee in Parliament now, and they are working in lots of different ways in order for the menopause to become more talked about more freely, with less shame and less embarrassment by women, but by employers as well, because it's just mired in this sort of reputation, which is or has been very difficult to break down. So yes, we absolutely need to get through that. But yeah, I mean, hopefully, just people beginning to talk about it will actually help with all of that as well, definitely.
So going from let's start with an employee's point of view, and you may be menopausal yourself. How can they, I suppose, talk about that, and what are the first steps in that context within the workplace? Because again, that's another tricky place, isn't it? And how you go about that, because people don't go around telling people they've got some sort of mental health. They might say they've got some disability, which is a little bit more not as a taboo. How do we bring that into the context? And also, how do employers create an environment where it's okay to talk about it and mention it and share it?
Yeah, absolutely. And as HR often tackles these issues, it's a good idea to have a policy and to put one in place. But it's not just about having a piece of paper and hoping that people will read that and it will just immediately sort of happen. It doesn't work like that. It needs, first of all, for that policy to be in place, but then it needs for the business to actually provide an environment that is actually sort of proactively then addressing and putting the policy into place. So it means that every woman who is suffering knows that she's able to go to her manager or to the business owner, and for her personal situation to be handled sensitively and effectively, because it does affect every woman in a different way. There was one tribunal case that went through not that long ago, actually, and a woman did successfully claim in the tribunal for harassment and for discrimination, because her boss thought that her menopausal symptoms would be the same as his wife's, based on nothing at all, really. And so, as you say, it can be very difficult for doctors to diagnose, but always in situations that involve anything to do with health, businesses need to include occupational health and actually make a referral to occupational health as well. And that will at least recognise it as a health problem. Again, there have been tribunals that have been successfully claimed because women have been managed out for a performance issue. And although the menopause might be affecting their work, it's because of a health issue. And it's very difficult, but very important that businesses make that difference as well. As you say, on the back of Davina McCall and various other female celebrities who have spoken about it more openly in recent years, ACAS actually put in some legislation towards the end of last year, December in 2021, to actually recommend that businesses put a policy, put a procedure in place, and actually enable women to be able to talk about health issues. And that might mean that you can set up peer support within a business. So there can be an online chat room, or maybe a real life person-to-person coffee session once a month, where women can get together and know that they have peer support within a business. It's also about training managers as well. As you say, mental health and well-being, they've become big watchwords, and people are much more open to recognising it and addressing it and supporting people in the workplace. Lots of businesses now have a mental health first aider, and typically recognising the menopause comes under the training for a mental health first aider. So that's something very easy that businesses can actually implement and then use as support as well. They can link in menopause policies to a wellbeing policy or health and safety as well. It's important that businesses do actually carry out risk assessments when women come to them to say, these are my symptoms, just to make sure that actually the business isn't contributing to any of those symptoms or the problems as well. Because you mentioned disability for gender or for age or for a disability, and at the moment the menopause is not recognised as a protected characteristic in some ways that other disabilities are. However, that conversation has begun, and it's being debated in Parliament, and we shall wait and see. I don't think it will be that long until we see that change coming about. If you look at the definition for disability in the Equality Act, then it defines that somebody is disabled if they have a physical or a mental impairment that has a substantial and a long-term negative effect on their ability to do normal daily activities. I mean, the menopause, it definitely does. Perimenopause and menopause, it definitely falls under the heading of disability. So we shall wait and watch with interest and see what happens. But that is creating debates within itself, I suppose, because tribunals are not being consistent in their approach towards cases which are citing menopausal symptoms as a reason for unfair dismissal. Because it's not defined in law yet as actually being a disability. But is that a risk that a business wants to take? They might have a judge who finds in favour, or they might not. But it's definitely a risk. And I think what businesses need to be really aware of is that now this issue is getting more airtime, and people are getting involved with the conversation. Tribunals have trebled in the last few years for women successfully claiming unfair dismissal, and I think it's something we're going to see on the increase. So it's important that businesses now start educating themselves and their managers, and just providing that kind of open conversation, and just by having a policy in place, just says to women, we recognise that this is something that needs to be addressed, and we recognise that, because at the moment it's just swept under the carpet like it doesn't exist. And so
and just going back to that policy, and that's a really good place to start. Where I find, does that policy take into consideration, is it the symptoms that you may think you have menopause? Because a lady may have gone to the doctors and the doctor's not diagnosed her, or they're going through the perimenopause, which my wife is going through, and having all the various brain fog, hot nights, all that type of thing going on.
Yeah.
And there could be those 40 other symptoms that are very different.
Yeah.
How do employers, employees navigate that? Because if you've got no diagnosis as such, what happens there? What are the, I guess, the practical outworkings of that, of helping an organization if they've got a policy in place, because they've talked to you, they've got a policy in place. How does that work when somebody comes, and is it from a diagnosis or is it from symptoms? How does that work? Because for me, feels a bit grey sort of thing.
Yes, it is a bit grey, and this is what's causing the problems at the moment, and why, as I say, inadvertently, employers can end up falling foul of the law because they aren't quite sure what to do. And I think particularly at this stage, when it's beginning to be talked about a bit more, a policy can be as educational for the employee as it can for the employer, to be honest. So I think it's helpful to include some of those symptoms within the policy, so that individuals can look out for them themselves, to put in links to various websites and apps like the Balance app I mentioned, where women can start tracking their own symptoms if they think there's something there. If they're not sure, but they think it might be affecting their work, they can go to their employer, who can say, we can refer you to occupational health. Have you been to your GP? Have you ruled out the fact that it might be anything else? It's about being supportive, because, as you said, unless you're a medical professional, you can't diagnose what it is. So it's, rather than trying to diagnose it, it's better to try and provide that supportive environment, really. And and it can be very easy for businesses to implement some things as well, particularly for the physical effect, like the hot flushes, etc. Then it might just be as simple as somebody putting in a flexible working request to say, please, can I sit near an open window? Or please, can I have a fan on my desk that helps reduce these symptoms? Or would it be all right if I sat under the aircon unit, which blows cold air on me all day long? That sometimes they're not very difficult changes that can be put in place by employers to really make a positive difference, actually.
And so if you're a line manager and you've got a lady and you're thinking she might be going through a perimenopause, right? Obviously you see her perhaps struggling with things or finding it difficult or whatever it may be you're seeing, and you've got a policy in place. What are the ways of going about that? Because obviously that can be quite a difficult, sensitive area to tackle, especially if the lady perhaps has not said anything or come to you, or will they come to you, particularly if you're a man, potentially, maybe a bit more difficult. So what would be the way as an organization how you might handle that if you're a line manager?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I think it's always a good idea just to sit down with somebody or just go out for coffee with them, make it less formal. You don't always have to have these meetings in the office necessarily, or face-to-face is better, definitely, but it can be in a less formal environment. And often employers or business owners get very concerned that they can't or shouldn't talk about anything personal with an individual because employment law is out to get them. And that's not always the case. The first stage of any process is to try to deal with it informally. It's a lot less stressful for everybody, and 9 times out of 10 it can be resolved in an informal way. So, and as you say, if it's lots of people just find talking about their health quite embarrassing anyway. So if it's affecting somebody's work, then it gives you a good place to start. Or if it's their attitude or their conduct in the office, a lot of people find that it really affects their moods, and they could be happy as Larry 1 minute and crying the next for no reason, even known to them. So if it's either affecting their work or it's affecting other people around them because of their behavior, then you immediately have a basis that you can just have a chat with them and sit down and say, look, I have noticed that either this aspect of your work or your demeanor in the office, tell me what's going on, what's happening with you at the moment. Is it something at work? Is it something at home? Do you want to talk about it? If you don't want to talk to me, is there somebody else in the office you'd feel comfortable? Or, if you've got a mental health first aider, say, I'd like you to have a chat with them, talk about what's going on. Or, and if they, if they seem like the right kind of age, we're talking about women from, maybe late 30s upwards who are starting to suffer from perimenopause, you can say to them, have a look in the handbook, have a look through the health and safety section or the well-being section or the family-friendly section, wherever you want to put that menopause policy in, and say to them, have a look through, and there are pointers and places you can go to for help, and see if if that's useful. If we can do anything, if it is a health related issue, we can refer you to occupational health. Have a think about it, come back to me in the next couple of days, and let's talk again. You can just have a really easy conversation. It doesn't have to be formal. It doesn't have to be, this is the policy, we must go through stage 1, 2, 3. Yes, you can always escalate things after that, but informal is the best way to approach it to start with.
And I guess it's almost, rather than assuming it's menopause, because it could be something else that could be triggering it, is almost use that the behavior you've noticed, or you've noticed their work go down, or whatever it may be you've noticed, to understand what's going on behind that actually is the way in, because it could be something, a mental health issue as opposed to menopause, or it just could be a bereavement at home or something like that, something that's triggered something.
It absolutely could. And just giving them that opening to have the conversation is the most important thing to do. That's the starting point, really, and then they can raise it, and you can help support them through it and point them in the right direction and give them the support. Offer flexible working requests so that maybe they might want to, if they're coming in on public transport to work, for instance, and they're crammed into a hot and sweaty train every morning, that's not going to help with the hot flashes. So, people can, or businesses, if they're able to, they can accommodate working hours, start slightly later, finish slightly later, in order to avoid rush hour. It's just about chatting through the options and seeing how best the business can be supportive, really.
It's sort of coming from the angle of almost that well-being approach, isn't it, to your employees, and trying to care for them no matter what, and then having some ideas of what may be causing these sort of concerns, having clear policies, clear steps, and support, and I guess almost signposting as well to try and support them, because I guess once somebody's said that it's going through a menopause, and you've got a policy and a supportive, and you put them in, they want to be near a window, or changing the way they operate in terms of time they come in. There's some sort of practical things. Are there any other things that might help menopausal sort of women in the workplace in terms of support?
I think it's really kind of to do with just it's training, really. It's that education and training piece. So and that's why kind of the policy is the first place. So any line managers training that you do, it's important to include the well-being and the health and safety piece, and to raise menopause as part of that as well. I think it's tricky at the moment because so many businesses don't have anything in place. So because they don't have anything in place, women don't know who to go to or how to raise the subject at all. So that's dangerous, because it leads businesses to think, oh, this is a problem I don't have. I don't know what she's talking about. But it's worth noting, actually, just some research that was done last month, actually, by the Women's Inequalities Committee, which showed that only 1 in 10 women of perimenopausal or menopausal age are putting in for flexible working requests. So that's 90% of women who aren't. So that just, it signifies that there are a lot of women in the workplace. As you said right at the beginning, it's the fastest growing age group within the workplace. So, if any business is employing women over the age of about 30, and it can affect women younger than that. So basically, if they're employing any women at all, then menopause is a subject that absolutely already exists within their business. And just because they haven't heard about it doesn't mean that people aren't being affected. that it is definitely affecting their work, it is affecting the business at the end of the day, and to ignore it is just opening the business up to potential risk.
So just to sort of finish, really, what would be the top 3 things if you were a business right now, you got no policy, you're sort of aware of menopause, but not in this sort of level.
Yeah.
What should they be doing now? What would be the takeaways for them right now to go away?
Yeah. So I think the takeaway is, as you've done yourself, is read a bit around the subject and just familiarize yourself with what the symptoms are, what the statistics are showing at the moment, that the growing number of women in the workplace of the menopausal age, and to actually look at putting a policy in place, but not just having a piece of paper and hoping that that will solve it. It's put the policy in place, train your managers, educate your staff, and be prepared to talk to your staff as well. All managers should be having regular one-to-ones with their staff. And if you are, then that's when you notice a change in somebody's behaviour or a drop in their performance levels. And that's what gives people the opportunity to actually raise it as well. So I would say, yeah, educate yourself, put a policy in place, and then help bring that policy to life by bringing in your managers and educating your staff properly.
Yeah, that's important. I know I'm a trustee of Food Bank, and we've recently put in place a menopause policy.
Great.
Which is good, but it's then making sure that that's cascaded. It's not a huge organisation, but certainly cascaded to everybody, and then every employee knows about this and is aware of it. So it's a good place to start. But as you say, educate yourself and look to ways, like any policy, bring it to life, isn't it? It's not about just having a policy. Oh, there, I'm protected now, I've got a policy. Actually, you've got to bring that to life and how that might work out and be living in the organisation. I found this topic fascinating, Victoria, and really enjoyed your insights and really help organisations, obviously employees. If people want to get in touch with you, because obviously you've got a wealth of experience, but also quite a passion about this as well, how might they do that?
Yes, absolutely. Well, they can find me via my website, which is ambridgehr.co.uk. I'm on LinkedIn as well, so they can either find me under my name or the company name. And also you can email me direct as well, which is hr.enquiries@ambridgehr.co.uk. And more than happy to talk more on this topic, how to introduce it into your business, and then, as you say, help bring the policy to life, or any other HR issues that businesses might be tackling and finding tricky at the moment as well.
Okay, well, thank you for your time, Victoria. Thank you for your insights.
Yeah, that's been great. Thank you very much.